Hey everyone, happy Friday. Craig Metz, Keller Williams Real Estate, another free real estate advice Friday. Um, today I wanted to talk about a few things. I want to talk a little bit about making an offer and how much we make that offer for. Again, similar to last week, this is based on a conversation that I had this week with a client. And wanted to talk a little bit about, and actually I should specify here, this actually wasn't a conversation with a client. This was a conversation that was presented to me by someone who knows I'm a realtor. And I thought it was very interesting. So I wanted to share how we go about this process and how we arrive at our numbers. And if you are a real estate agent, and you've been a real estate agent over the past few years, you're going to get quite a few of these types of conversations where I would say it's akin to a hot take on the current housing situation, not based in any sort of logic or facts or any sort of fact-based narrative. It was really kind of a hot take. So I wanted to share that with people and kind of lead it into a conversation with how we arrive at an offer price. So here in Hunterdon County, the market's still, relatively crazy. I'd say over the past few months, our biggest issue is just inventory. But as a few months ago, I would go back as far as 6 to 12 months ago. Everything had a multitude of offers. We still have multiple offers on most things. The key difference now is we don't have as many offers, but we still are dealing with quite a few buyers who just never found anything in that previous crazy market. So, you're still seeing a lot of the big offers that are coming in. So while there may only be 2 or 3 offers, you are still often up against those big offers. There's also just a lot of people that have still been looking through this entire thing, and they're just tired. And they just said, you know what, let's just throw something at it and make sure we get it because I want this process to end. So you still have a little bit of buyer fatigue that you're up against. So a few things that are driving those offers up. Lack of inventory, tired buyers. Now, what's pushing against this, obviously, is rising interest rates. So if you have a non-cash buyer, a rising interest rate can obviously chop into the buying power that the buyer has. They can't necessarily throw all that money at it. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about how we arrive at a price. So let me start with what I was told this week. And if you're a realtor, you get faced with a lot of these kind of boiled down, I would say dumbed down versions of things they hear in the news. Now, everyone knows that the real estate market is crazy. I mean, it's all over the news. In fact, literally just before I turned this broadcast on, I got a notification on my phone. Pulling it up now just to show you. So here it is. This is from Market Watch. I use Apple News, so I use an aggregator. So I don't even really necessarily know Market Watch. But here it is. I'm going to hold it up to the camera. Here, let's see. An inventory crunch is making life impossible for home buyers. Our interactive map can help you track the availability of houses for sale near you. So kind of a hot take type of thing. And it would be very easy to be alarmed by these kind of reports. And actually, I want to see, it says you can pull this up and it'll tell you your area. So see how inventory has changed in your county. So I'm going to go over. So they're tracking this by inventory change from 2017. So okay, that's a good parameter to use because, like I just said, the biggest thing right now is just complete shortage of inventory. So anything approaching pink is down 50%. And again, this is inventory change from 2017. As you get to dark red, that's negative 100%. So let's zoom all the way into where we are. And in Hunterdon, the color that I'm seeing and the surrounding areas are not much different. It doesn't change until you get a little further south, like Middlesex area. The color I'm seeing is actually like before pink, so it looks like we're down about 40%. Here's the picture I'm looking at, and it's going to be real hard. So you see New Jersey in there. It's got that kind of pink color. You look up north there in Maine, it's super red. And there's a lot of hot markets, South Carolina, Raleigh area, stuff like that. Looks like some hot spots in the south. Out west, you can see what's going on out west according to their map. Nevada has a couple of hot spots. Wyoming. Washington, it actually looks like it's up. Colorado, it's up in some areas. So this is not a terrible take. I mean, this is actually a relatively informed take on the situation, but the headline is something that obviously is going to be designed to grab attention. And, it's not the full story. So listen, it's, and this is probably speaking much more to like society problems than real estate problems, but, people just see that headline and that's what sticks in their head. So the take that I was told this week by someone who's not in real estate was, I heard that agents are listing houses way below market price and then telling them that buyers can only be cash only. And in other words, kind of insinuating that agents are driving this. Now, listen, I love this job and everything, but the one thing that, I will say that agents really don't have an ability to do is drive the market. There are certain things that some agents could do that may or may not be ethical that would drive the market, but you're talking about a very small subset of agents. And those things are generally not effective. And I won't get into too much about what are some of the things that are being done that would be along those lines. In my entire career, and I've sold all over New Jersey, all types of homes, distressed properties, investment properties, residential, commercial. I've done almost all of those things. I've never seen ever an agent intentionally list something way below asking and say cash only. The exceptions to that would be there could be certain types of properties where a type of loan won't work. Like it might not be a property because of many different factors where a conventional loan would work. Like a lot of times you'll see something that says renovation loans only. And that is because the house is uninhabitable. And cash is always presented an option because obviously if you have cash, you can buy the house. The bank's not going to be looking at it. There's no appraisal. That's easy. But I've never seen someone intentionally list it way below listing and say cash only. That's just not really a thing I've ever seen. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I've never seen it. And I'm not only talking about the deals I've done, but you can imagine how many houses I look at in a given week for clients and how many houses I've shown. I've shown, we're probably approaching 1,000 houses I've shown at this point. I've never seen that done. Do agents sometimes list houses below what they think they're going to get for it in order to kind of, exude a bidding situation or get excitement on their listing? Yeah, maybe. A lot of times, though, it's unintentional. I mean, in this market over the last 2 years, we're just constantly surprised by what the market bears. So I know I'm speaking for myself personally. A lot of the stuff that I've listed, I really am trying to list it at fair market value. Now, I know that there's on a lot of them, if they're in really good condition, they're staged properly, the photos are great, it's in a great desirable area. I know it's probably going to go over that, but I'm not going to list it where I think it might go because there's really not a whole lot of incentive there. I think the biggest mistake that people can make in this market is overpricing the home because you're going to alienate buyers before they even see it. In my opinion, you want to drive traffic to it, get people excited about it, get people seeing that there's other traffic coming, and that creates a urgency amongst buyers. And, that's just basically proper marketing. It's not doing anything unethical. You're still presenting it to people. I always put it at a price where the seller would be happy to get that money. But if, the natural interest in the property, it's properly marketed, people get excited about it, it looks great, and it gets, people start bidding over that asking price. I mean, that's what's been happening. And that is just more of a situation that comes as a result of just a lack of inventory, is that people see a listing like, ooh, I really want this one, because they realize there's no more guarantees anymore that another one's going to come right behind it. Now, 3 years ago, this was all very different, right? So if we had a new buyer and they were looking for a house and we went and saw a house and they're like, oh, it's a pretty good house. But, I don't love it. They would generally have time to leave the house, go look at a couple other houses, and then say, you know what, let's start thinking about going back to that first one, maybe take a second visit and then put an offer in. You can't do that anymore because there's no time. By the time you would come back to that first listing nowadays, that is probably gone. So that's kind of what is the biggest difference. And again, that's just a product of just lack of inventories. They're just getting scooped up as soon as they hit the market. And there are exceptions to that. But I mean, back 3 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for a house to sit for 3 months. Whereas in this market, that is extremely uncommon, unless there's any number of issues that would cause it to sit for 3 months. The biggest one being that it's overpriced. I've had clients actually this week say to me, well, if it's overpriced, why don't people just make an offer what they think it's worth? That's a great question. And I said that to my client. I said, it's a fair assumption to say that someone goes and looks at a $500,000 house and say, I love this house, but it's not $500,000. And have their realtor run the comps. And the realtor comes back and says, I'm just not seeing $500,000. However, at $470, I think it's great. Let's put in an offer for $470. That used to be extremely common. The house goes up at a price. The buying agent hopefully runs their comps and says, not seeing 500, I'm seeing the 470. Let's put in the offer 470. And then the sellers end up accepting it. We did the activity last week where we went through local listings to see how many are actually going over asking, and saw that at least locally here to Clinton and Pittstown and stuff like that, it's quite a mixed bag. And we saw that with outliers, the average was actually under asking. And then we took out the outliers and found that it was just over asking, about $6,000 over asking. So again, that narrative is exaggerated for sure. But this is why, as a realtor just walking around in life, we get a lot of these kind of hot takes thrown at us. And it can be very exhausting because then you have to kind of debate it. And some people are like not open to debate. They're like, oh, no, I know what I read. I'm reading it all the time. Well, okay. In this local market, when you see it on like I just held up the article for my iPhone, they're not talking about Hunterdon County. That article is definitely not about Hunterdon County. In fact, in the interactive map, not the one I just showed, but the other one where they kind of highlight some areas, it's like the closest thing to New Jersey is Raleigh, North Carolina in the graphic. So they're definitely not like focusing in on this area. Now there are areas of New Jersey that are definitely red hot. And that is to be expected because we're very densely populated here, but Hunterdon County is not one of them. So how do we go about this offer process? And this is a good education for anyone that's looking to buy because, after I've looked at a few houses and I have a lot of buyers going right now, and buyers that are immediately buying I'm always looking over at the sign. That's what I'm doing right now. I have 4 or 5 that are really actively shopping, looking, I'm showing 2 today. Both of those clients are looking to land in a house now. After we've gone through this process a little bit and I've explained the situation to them, it's common knowledge how the process works as far as looking at a house, viewing a house, and then potentially putting an offer in on a house. But if you're a first-time buyer with me, we've likely done a buyer's consultation. I will say that I highly, highly, highly recommend a buyer's consultation with anyone who's going to work with me. That's when we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff. And not only so that how the process works, but also what my process is as your agent. And if you are working with a real estate agent and you don't know their process, you should definitely ask them. And if they can't give you a very succinct answer as to what their buying process is and their offer process and how they arrive at their offer process and what their strategy is, in all honesty, you should probably find another agent, because it's so competitive out there that it's so important that you know exactly what they're doing and you're comfortable with it. So let's talk about my process. So, and it's very basic, but I think it's very important information for how we arrive at these things, so that we don't get these talking points like the one I told you about is, oh my God, I heard that agents are underpricing houses and then telling people they can only offer cash. That's not true, at least that I've seen. So let's say that we go look at a house. The house is in 100. I'll give an example of a house I looked at this week. I looked at a house in Hopewell. The house is for $500,000. We know that Hopewell is a relatively competitive market because of it's very, first of all, Hopewell is a great town. I absolutely love Hopewell. But secondly, it's very close to Princeton. And we know that Princeton prices are, very high compared to the surrounding areas. So Hopewell is kind of Princeton adjacent. So you get a little bit of that runoff. Hopewell is also just a very nice town, solid school systems, et cetera, et cetera. Very desirable area. So when we leave a showing, so first of all, we're going to go look at the house together. I'm going to look for any just like major red flags. I'm not there to inspect the house. I'm just, I'm just looking for age of roof and all your, your basic stuff that you're looking for when you look at a house. What's the situation with the septic system? What's the age of the roof? How does the HVAC look? Age of windows, that kind of stuff. And it's a conversation, because any of those things, you very well still might buy the house, but it's things that we should be aware of, not only in making our offer, but things to look out for when we have the home inspection. And it's just a conversation. It's an open conversation with the buyer. And, to give you an obvious examples, if you went to the house and all those things are slam dunks, brand new septic, brand new HVAC, roof is brand new, it's in a beautiful area, then obviously it's like, oh yeah, we should definitely make an offer on this. If the septic shot and it needs to be replaced, then the question is, well, are they getting it replaced? Because that's a big ticket item. That's obviously something that needs to be discussed beforehand so that I can get that information. That's assuming it's not in the listing. So, all right, so this house in Hopewell. So we look it over. There's some stuff there. It's an older style house. This house was actually built in the 1700s, which, again, here in Hunterdon area and some of the surrounding areas, there's quite a few 1700 houses. But this one was a 1700 house, had 1700 era house issues, for example, which is funny because I actually showed a totally separate 1700 built house yesterday to a different client in a different area. So I had a few of these this week, but they shared one common issue, which is you can't get to the basement through the house. You have to go outside to get in the basement. So then the question becomes, well, what's in the basement? In both cases, their well equipment was in the basement. And in one case, the electrical panel was in the basement. Now, for my buyer, that could be a situation where that's not ideal. I mean, if you have someone who's, physically limited, or you have someone who doesn't like to go in basements, or you have someone that lives by themselves, or any number of reasons, it might not be ideal for your electrical panel to be in your basement that you can't get to through your house. I mean, really, for any of us, I wouldn't want to deal with that. If the, power goes out well, I shouldn't say the power goes out. Let's say you pop a fuse at 10 p.m. Do you really want to go outside into a dark basement that may or may not have proper lighting and deal with an electrical panel? Probably not. But for some people, like, I'm not worried about that. But these are the kind of considerations. So anyway, 1700 house problems. So anyway, we look at the house, we identify some things that could use some work, and that's really going to color our offer. Because again, if it was a slam dunk, then we have a different process. But now we're like kind of keeping track of the things that are not ideal for my client and what would kind of dissuade them from getting to full asking price. But My process is first, there's two things that need to happen. And these should happen every single time that you make an offer, and you should make sure your agent is doing this. The first thing is, and these seem very obvious, but I will tell you that a lot of agents do not do these things. The first thing, obviously, is you got to run your comps. Now, if you have an agent, there are many different ways to run comps. And when I say comps, I'm talking about comparative properties. There are different systems. You can do it right through the MLS. Some people have a very manual process, like downloading the data and putting it in Excel. I do some combination of those things. Kind of depends on what areas I'm working in, because I'm a member of about 6 different MLSs. Some are easier to do certain ways than others. I do use a service that runs CMAs, or comparative marketing analysis, in a sort of an automated way. And then what I do is I double check it against the actual MLSs. Now, because Hopewell is a perfect example, because Hopewell is actually on the border of several MLSs. So you have to be very careful that you don't choose a single MLS to run your comps. You might want to actually pull in data from 2 or 3, which is why sometimes it's better to use a service that pulls it all together. But the bottom line is that's the first thing we have to do. And really what we're doing is we're looking at properties and saying, well, this is what I would charge. This is my market value for this property. And you start there. That's your baseline. And again, this is just my strategy. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just what I do. The next thing I'm going to do, is call the listing agent. I've done my comps now. I have a number in my mind of what market value is, fair market value of that house, what I would have listed it for. And remember what I said, I list at fair market value. That means that sometimes, though, I still know it's probably going to go over that number. So that's step 1. Step 2 is call the listing agent. Now, here's the questions that you're going to ask your listing agent. You're going to say, do you have other offers on it? Has it been under contract at all? Why is it still available? That's important if you see something that's been on for a few months in this market, because that could be indicative of a few things. Very often, it's just indicative that they came out a little high. They listed it initially with a pretty high price. And that a lot of times will kind of lead to a slower cycle, and they don't get that initial rush that they'd expected because they had overpriced it initially. Now, what are the listing agent's answers to these questions? They're not obligated to tell me anything. So if I say, how many offers do you have? They can say, we have quite a few. And I might say, well, how strong are those offers? And they might say, I'm not really at liberty to say. Now, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, there's a little bit of an error in strategy on the listing agent's parts. Because what would be the incentive to tell me that? If the fact of the matter is you have many offers and they're all over asking price, you can't tell me the price. I get that. We all know that. I'm not saying what's the number that's going to win this house. I'm really just saying how strong your offer, so I can have an intelligent conversation with my client. I'm going to go back to my client and say, hey, you know what? I just talked to the agent and they said they have several offers. It doesn't really matter if I know exactly how many. If it's 3, that's plenty. So, and they're all very strong. Now, if an agent tells me that they have a very strong offer, I'm going to assume that they mean it's over asking. And sometimes they'll just kind of give me a tip off. Look, if it's, if you're going to come in with 10% down, you're going to have a really tough time here. That's a good, honest answer, because it really saves everyone time. Because the fact of the matter is they probably have a cash offer or something. And no matter what number we throw at them with a 10% conventional mortgage, not only is it highly unlikely that we'll actually beat the cash offer, but we still need to do appraisal and all that, and, go through underwriting and all the things that we need to do for a loan. So they're basically just saying, hey, appreciate your efforts, but you're probably in a losing battle. And where we go from there varies. A lot of times I'll just say, all right, well, keep me posted if anything happens. And they'll very often give me a call back and say, hey, that other deal fell apart. Would you guys still be interested? And that's fine too. And a lot of times there is kind of a follow-through process. If I get a stop sign, I will continue to check in with that agent, say, hey, is that deal is still going through? Just want to make sure. And very often they're like, actually, it's kind of, it's a little rickety right now. If you guys want to go ahead and put an offer in, that would be fine. But let's say there are no offers on the house. And I ask that agent, say, hey, what's the activity on the house? Do you have any offers? And they choose just not to tell me. Again, in my opinion, this is a flawed strategy by the listing agent, because why wouldn't you try to create a little bit of urgency? If this is me as the listing agent, I would say, no, coast is clear. If you put a good solid offer in, you can probably have the house. Because all listing agents really need to know is whether or not I plan to put in an offer. Because when the next person calls the next day, which again, in this market is very common, they're going to have this conversation multiple times. They can say, oh, you know what? I just talked to an agent. They're referring to me, and he's planning to put in an offer. Now they've created agency for the other offer. So in my opinion, there's no reason for a listing agent not to tell you the truth. There's literally no incentive here. They should tell you exactly what's happening, because it tells me how urgent it is. This is unique to the current market. It's not always going to be like that, but in this market, that's how it is. So I'm going to gauge that agent. And some agents are very transparent and some agents are very secretive. I think a lot of times there really is no reason to be secretive. They just think they're supposed to, or they don't actually know the rules. They don't actually know that they can give you some idea of the activity. They can't say, well, we have an offer for 540. That's conventional. We have an offer for 530. That's cash. Obviously, that's not what I'm asking, because they can't tell me that. That's not in the best interest of their seller. It's a little bit of unfair. That would be impossible to compete in that environment. It would be horrible. So I'm not asking for that. I generally tell people what I think, what most agents have arrived at is kind of realtor speak. Is if I call them up and they say, hey, what do the offers look like on this house? Assuming there are some. First is, are there offers? Yes, there are. Okay. How many offers do you have? We have 6. Okay. What do the offers look like? How strong are they? I either get an answer like, they're okay, meaning, Craig, bring me a good offer and this will be yours. Or they'll say, they're solid, meaning they probably have a good price, but there's some flaws in the offers, like, they have 5% down, or, something that's not ideal for the seller. Or I call them and they're like, Craig, they're outrageous, which we get that answer all the time. Like, you're going to have to bring, a dump truck full of money to get this house. They're just being honest. There's no reason for them to lie to me about that, because it would almost discourage me from making an offer. But then I can go back to my client and say, look, if you have to have this house, we're going to have to bring, a very good, aggressive offer. That's how we color what your offer is going to look like. So it's really kind of that 2-stage process. Number 1, run the comparative marketing analysis on it. Number 2, what is the competitive situation? Now, the third layer of this that I do with my clients, I generally give them a ceiling. So what I mean by this is, I'm assuming that we're talking about a client who's using a loan here. Cash is a little bit of a different story, because you don't have to deal with the bank. So if you're using cash, it's not necessary that you get an appraisal on the house. Some people may still choose to get an appraisal just for their own information, but there's no bank, so you're not asked to do an appraisal. But with my clients, one of the things that I do with one of my lenders is we actually give a price. So again, let's go back to an example of a $500,000 house. In our offer, let's say my client's putting 20% down. So in other words, they're financing, $400,000 out of a $500,000 house. So they're really only borrowing 80% of the value if we're assuming the house is worth $500,000. What I do with my lender is I say, okay, based on their complete financial picture, credit scores, money in the bank, their comfort level, how much they want the house, all of those factors, what could they go down to on appraisal? Meaning, what would be the minimum number that we wouldn't have to go back to the sellers and say, I'm sorry, it didn't appraise. In other words, at some point, the buyer's making a choice to take on some of that burden. Again, typically, let's say it appraised for $470 on a $500,000 house, you got a $30,000 gap there. What would typically happen in prior markets would be buyer and seller would come back to the negotiating table and split the difference. $15K price reduction, 15K in cash from the buyer, splits the difference. Everyone takes a 15K hit, but you arrive back at a number that everyone's like, all right, well, it is what it is, and everyone's comfortable. That's fine. It doesn't necessarily work like that anymore. And one of the ways that buyers are getting edges now is that they're protecting their appraisal amount. So I can go to my lender and say, what could they go down to? And my lender could come back to me and say, okay, as long as it appraises for 380, your clients are good. But what that means is my client is taking on that liability. Because if it does, in fact, appraise for 380, by the way, extremely uncommon that a house for 500,000 would appraise that low, but not impossible. And I don't want to be holding the bag if that ever happens. So I'm very cautious with my clients to make sure they understand these appraisal gaps. But in theory, if it appraised for 120,000 under the contract price, my clients would cover it. So why do I give a ceiling? Well, I think people get so anxious in this market, particularly first-time home buyers, that they're like, we have to have this house. So how much of the waiver, or how high can we go? And then what can we offer as far as an appraisal waiver? There is a point where I will say, do not go higher than this number, because I'm getting the feeling that we're getting outside of what I think the value of that house is. And generally speaking, that number is agreed upon by all. Like when I tell them that number, like don't go over 560. We all agree at that point. Like that would be reaching a level of insanity. And even if they got it at 560 for this $500,000 house, they're probably not going to be too happy about it, because they paid absolute top dollar for it. So that's kind of the third aspect of my offer process. So that's it in a nutshell. And I do actually have 2 showings today, so I have to run out of here. And I'm actually going to, while I'm wrapping this up, I'm actually checking my GPS to see how long it'll take me to get to my showing. But that's kind of my 3-stage process. I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong, or, I'll say that I've had success with that method. And I do have to go. I will say that I've had success with this method, but I'm not saying it's perfect. I don't think there is a perfect method, but if you can't have a conversation with your agent that looks like what we just talked about here, then I think you need to consider having that conversation, getting to the bottom of why they don't have that. But you may just need to find yourself a new agent, because it's tough out there. So you don't want to wait until you find the perfect house, do a swing and a miss on it to determine that you may not have the best agent. So in a nutshell, that's the buying process. So to go back to that initial hot take of, I heard agents are putting houses on the market way under market value and then asking cash only. Not true. At least I've never even heard of that. And I'm pretty locked into these types of things. So I would say that's not true. So I wanted to give you a little insight as to how we arrive at not only listing price, but how we arrive at offer price. It's a pretty, business focused, data driven process. It's not just, we're not selling used cars here. No offense to used car salesmen, but it's not the same type of thing. It's a pretty, solid business approach of trying to, meet where the market is on certain properties, and also the viability of your buyer. So that's it in a nutshell. And I hope that answers some questions about the offer process. I do have a YouTube video that talks about this in a little bit more of a succinct manner. It's on my YouTube channel, which I believe the link is on all these videos. So if you want to check out or talk further, please do that. As always, please feel free to message me or text me with any general questions you'd like me to cover in future weeks. And I am going to run out now. It's another Friday of showing. So hope everyone's being safe and being healthy. And hopefully we get some nice weather soon. I think we got a bunch of rain coming this weekend, but hope you're all doing well. Take care. And I will talk to you all next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.